I had just sat down with my morning coffee when I heard the knock. Sharp, mechanical, and way too early to be anything good. You know, the kind of knock that carries authority before you even open the door. And when I did, there they were. Two uniformed officers on my porch, hands resting lightly on their belts, polite but unreadable. Across the street, Linda was watching. She didn't even try to pretend she wasn't. Arms crossed over her floral bathrobe, lips pursed like she'd just sucked on a lemon. Her eyes flicked from the officers to me and back again, like she was waiting for a show to start. "Morning, sir," the taller officer began. "We received a complaint about some suspicious individuals staying at this residence." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "We were told there may be squatters or unregistered tenants here." I almost laughed, but nothing about their faces suggested this was a joke. If this story already has your blood boiling, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a like. Trust me, it only gets worse. The suspicious individuals in question? Three men I served with over a decade ago. Marines, veterans, brothers. Two of them had flown in from out of state. The third, Manny, had just gotten out of a rough patch. Divorce, job loss, the works. So yeah, I offered them my guest rooms for a couple of weeks. No drugs, no noise, no nonsense. But to Linda, they were suspicious. "They park on the street," she had once hissed at me at a block party. "They come and go at all hours. One of them smokes." I'd nodded politely, trying to ignore the smell of boxed wine on her breath. That was a week ago. I should have known she wouldn't let it go. Back on my porch, I stood still, trying not to let the anger rise. "They're guests," I said calmly. "They're all veterans. None of them are squatters. They're staying here with my full permission." The officers exchanged a glance. I could tell they didn't want to be here. They'd been dispatched because of an HOA complaint, probably phrased in the most dramatic way possible. "You mind if we take a quick look around? Just to confirm?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell them to get off my property, but I also didn't want my buddies waking up to the sight of patrolmen in the kitchen. So I nodded and stepped aside. They didn't find anything, of course. The house was clean. The guys were half-dressed and half asleep, blinking through the awkward introductions and offering polite nods. Manny even offered them coffee. The officers declined and left after 10 awkward minutes, apologizing on the way out. "We just had to check the box," one of them muttered. "Sorry for the inconvenience." But the real inconvenience was just beginning. That afternoon, I got an email from the HOA board. "Multiple residents have expressed concern," it said. "We'd like to schedule a hearing regarding your use of the property." It wasn't enough that the police found nothing. It wasn't enough that these men were decorated veterans. Linda had stirred the pot, and now the whole neighborhood was watching. By the next morning, I noticed the difference. Neighbors who used to wave at me didn't. Cars slowed when they passed my driveway. Someone even left a typed note in my mailbox. "This isn't a shelter." I tore it up. I didn't say anything to the guys, not yet. They were finally starting to relax, joke again, sleep through the night without checking the windows. I wasn't about to ruin that. But inside, I was burning. Not because Linda didn't like them. That was predictable. What enraged me was the way everyone else just nodded along. Linda wasn't always like this. Or maybe she was, and I just never noticed. When I first moved into the neighborhood 5 years ago, she introduced herself within minutes, smiling, overly friendly, holding a tray of cookies that tasted like chalk and resentment. "I like to know who's living around me," she'd said. "It keeps the community safe." Back then, I thought she meant well. It took about 3 months before I understood the truth. Linda didn't want community. She wanted control. She reported people for leaving their garbage bins out too long, complained when a teen parked his truck half an inch over the sidewalk. She once got a single mom fined because her kid's bike was left on the lawn. Her weapon of choice wasn't violence, it was email. Dozens of them. Each one CC'd to the HOA, marked urgent, always dripping with passive aggression. "This isn't a trailer park," she once wrote about a neighbor repainting his shutters. "We have standards." And now her eyes were on me. The HOA hearing was scheduled for a Thursday evening. It was supposed to be informal, just a few board members and myself. But when I walked into the clubhouse, Linda was already there, seated in the front row, back ramrod straight, with a folder in her lap thick enough to start a fire. I didn't sit. I didn't want to. One of the board members, Mr. Davis, cleared his throat. "Tom, thank you for coming. We've had a few concerns raised about your property." "Not my property," Linda cut in. "The activity around it." Mr. Davis ignored her. "It seems you've had a few long-term guests?" "Yes," I said. "Friends. They're veterans." Linda snorted. "Well, that explains the noise. My walls have been shaking all week." "There hasn't been any noise," I replied calmly. "They go to bed before 10. They don't even play music." "And what about the smoking?" she asked sharply. "That man smokes on the porch. I can smell it in my kitchen." "One of them smokes outside, yes." "Not allowed under Section 4.2, she snapped, flipping through her folder. "No offensive odors. It's clearly written." Mr. Davis raised a hand. "Linda, please, let Tom speak." But it didn't matter. I knew the tone of the room. They weren't asking questions. They were waiting to justify a decision already made. "Your guests," another board member asked, "are they registered with the HOA?" "Registered," I repeated. "They're not tenants. They're my friends." Linda leaned forward. "Then why are they still here after 2 weeks?" "That's not a visit. That's occupancy." I felt something shift in my chest, something cold. "They served this country," I said quietly. "They don't have family to go back to. They needed a place. I gave them one." The silence that followed wasn't respectful. It was uncomfortable, like I'd brought something dirty into a clean room. "We'll review everything and be in touch," Mr. Davis finally said. But Linda wasn't finished. As I turned to leave, she called out, "This isn't a halfway house, Tom. If you want to run a shelter, there are laws for that." I stopped walking. For a second, I thought about turning back, about saying everything I'd held in. But I didn't. I just walked out. That night, Manny packed a bag, said he didn't want to cause any more trouble. "You're not causing trouble," I told him. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm used to this, man. People see the beard, the boots, the scars, and they think I'm dangerous. I've learned when to walk away." And just like that, he left. Quiet. No goodbye to the others. Just out the door into the night. After Manny left, the house felt heavier. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was thick, clinging, like the aftermath of a slammed door. I didn't tell the others right away. I let them wake up slow, make coffee, flip through the news like it was just another morning. But when Jace came into the kitchen and saw Manny's empty cup still in the sink, he just stared at it. "He gone?" I nodded. Jace didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he walked out to the porch and lit a cigarette. Same spot, same ritual. Linda stood in her window as she always did, arms crossed like she was guarding the neighborhood from invaders. That day I got another email. "Based on recent discussion," it said, "you are hereby notified to cease any extended guest stays beyond 10 days within a 30-day period. Failure to comply may result in fines." No signature, just a cold digital wall. I called Davis, no answer. I replied to the board with a simple question. "Do you understand what you're asking me to do?" They didn't respond. By Friday, the rumors had grown claws. Someone said I was running a sober house. Another claimed they saw military types coming and going with duffel bags. One neighbor crossed the street to avoid me while I was mowing the lawn. Another parent pulled her kid away from my mailbox like I had something contagious. This wasn't about rules anymore. It was fear, manufactured, misplaced, but real enough to poison everything. That night I sat with Jace and Paul on the back porch. We didn't say much, just listened to the wind move through the trees and the distant hum of sprinklers clicking on across the lawns. "I can leave too," Paul said eventually. "I get it, Tom. You didn't sign up for this kind of war." I looked at him. "You're not going anywhere." He smiled, sad and tired. "Feels like we're back overseas. Different battlefield, same damn suspicion." Jace flicked ash into an empty beer can. "You know what gets me? We wore the uniform, did the job, bled for the flag, And now some woman with a garden club badge thinks we're a threat because we don't look like her idea of safe. He wasn't wrong. Linda didn't see people. She saw categories. And if you didn't fit her fantasy of suburban bliss, clean lawns, quiet voices, invisible problems, you were a threat. But something in me shifted that night. Maybe it was the beer. Maybe it was the memory of watching Manny walk off into the dark like a ghost. Maybe it was just the fact that I was tired of letting this woman dictate the terms of my life. I'm not backing down, I said. Jace looked at me. Then we fight? I shook my head. We don't fight. We show them who the hell we are. The next morning, I called an old friend, retired colonel, now working in Veterans Outreach, told him what was happening. He asked for names, dates, context. Then he said 5 words that made me sit up straighter. You want me to visit? 2 days later, we scheduled a meeting. HOA had no idea what was coming. They scheduled the next hearing for a Tuesday evening. Same clubhouse, same stiff chairs and weak coffee, same board members trying to look impartial, while Linda sat in the front row like she was about to win a prize for neighborhood integrity. Only this time, we didn't come alone. At exactly 6:58 p.m., Colonel Richard Halstead walked in. Full dress uniform, medals, bars, ribbons, real ones, not the kind you buy at costume stores. His posture was perfect, his gaze unshakable. Every person in that room felt it before he said a single word. He didn't sit. He didn't smile. He simply stood behind me and nodded once. Mr. Davis cleared his throat, obviously rattled. Tom, would you like to open? No, I said. The colonel will speak first. Linda's mouth twitched. And who exactly is he? I'm the reason your flag's still flying, Halstead said without blinking. Dead silence. Then he stepped forward, pulled a folder from under his arm, and began speaking. He told them who Manny was, a Bronze Star recipient, wounded twice in service, currently on a recovery program for PTSD. He told them who Paul was, naval engineer, 10 years active duty, now working with veteran mentorship. And Jace, infantryman turned counselor, running workshops for soldiers transitioning back into civilian life. These men are not vagrants. They are not criminals. They are the ones who stood between your children and a bullet, Halstead said. And now, after everything they've endured, they're being cast out of a neighborhood because someone doesn't like the way they look. Linda shifted in her chair. No one said anything about looks. It's about rules. No, Halstead snapped. It's about comfort. Yours. You're uncomfortable being reminded that freedom has a price. And sometimes that price parks on your street and smokes a cigarette. Mr. Davis looked down at his notes. The others didn't speak. Halstead turned to them one by one. You should be ashamed, he said. You allowed a vendetta to dictate policy. You empowered someone who uses the HOA as a weapon to target neighbors she doesn't approve of. Linda shot up. That's slander. No, Linda, I said quietly. It's the truth. You don't enforce the rules. You twist them. I pulled out my phone and opened a folder. Photos. From the neighborhood. Trash bins left out. Cars parked illegally. Noise complaints ignored. All from homes you could practically smell the money in. None of them were fined. None of them received threats. But when my guest came, I said, turning to the board, the rules became gospel. Halstead stepped aside, letting the silence land. Then someone stood from the back. It was Mr. Patel, quiet guy, lived 2 houses down from me. We'd barely exchanged more than a few waves. I served too, he said. I didn't speak up last week, and I regret it. What Tom's doing is what we should be doing. Welcoming, supporting, not whatever this is. Another voice joined, then another. 2 more neighbors stood up, one of them almost in tears. And just like that, the tide turned. The board called a recess. When they came back, they were pale and stiff. We're dismissing the complaint, Davis said. There will be no fines, no hearings. This matter is closed. Linda stood up like she'd been slapped. This is outrageous. You're just going to let him get away with it? No, Linda, Davis said, looking exhausted. We're going to let him live. Linda didn't show her face for weeks after that night. Her blinds stayed shut. Her porch light, always blindingly bright, was off for the first time I could remember. The dog she used to walk 3 times a day, hired walker. She became a shadow in a place where she used to bark orders. I didn't feel triumphant, just still. Paul and Jay stayed a few more weeks. They helped me rebuild the old shed out back, installed a rainwater system, cooked ridiculous amounts of food, and made the house feel like a home again. When Manny came back, he didn't say anything. Just walked in, dropped his bag, and hugged me like he thought I'd changed my mind. "I thought you were done with this," he said. "I was," I told him. Then I remembered what we're made of. One afternoon, a kid from the street knocked on my door, nervous, maybe 12, holding a notebook and a pen. "Are you really a soldier?" he asked. "No," I said, smiling. "But I live beside some legends." He came back the next day, and the next. Soon he was bringing friends. They asked questions, played fetch with Jace's dog, helped Paul with repairs. One of them started recording interviews with the guys, said he wanted to make a school project. I watched it grow, quietly, like something healing. The board sent me a follow-up letter, no apology, just a dry line that said, "Thank you for your cooperation." I framed it and hung it in the bathroom. But then something unexpected happened. An email arrived from a local paper, then another from a veterans organization, then a podcast host. Word had spread. Someone in that room had recorded the colonel's speech and shared it online. It had gone viral. Suddenly, our small neighborhood story was everywhere. And Linda, she became a meme. People clipped her quotes, turned them into punchlines. "This isn't a halfway house" became a sarcastic rally cry for veteran support forums. Even the colonel, ever composed, cracked a smile when I showed him. But I didn't revel in it. I'd seen what shame could do to a person. And as much as Linda had earned every bit of public mockery, I knew this wasn't about revenge. That wasn't the point. So I left a note on her porch. Short, unemotional. "We're not enemies, just neighbors. If you ever want to talk, doors open." She never replied, but 2 weeks later, her porch light came back on. Sometimes that's enough. Now I host a monthly cookout. Nothing fancy, just good food, open chairs, and no questions asked. Sometimes it's vets, sometimes it's families. Once it was a guy who just needed a place to sit where no one would look at him funny. People wave again. Not all of them, but enough. Jace is working with a nonprofit now. Paul's back in school. Manny, well, he finally bought that cabin he always talked about. And me? I'm just a guy with a porch and a few extra chairs. Turns out that's more than enough to start something worth keeping.